Heavyweight champion Cassius Clay goes through the final stages of training for the defense of his title against Ernie Terrell. A rugged sparring partner tosses some heavy leather at the champ, forcing him to give ground. Experts predict that Terrell will prove to be the toughest opponent for Cassius so far. Cassius rattles off a bit of doggerel verse for the challenger, Terrell.
He's going around claiming to be the real heavyweight champ. But after I'm finished, he'll just be a tramp. Now, I'm not saying this just to be funny, but I'm fighting Ernie because he needs the money.
Ernie's answer will come in the ring at the Houston Astrodome.
He was able to, think and be creative as an artist in the ring. It was a poetry in motion with him.
And this might shock and amaze you, but I will destroy Joe Frazier.
Cassius Clay of Chicago challenges Gary Joyce, the Eastern heavyweight champ, and Joyce is in trouble from the first round on.
No man knocks me down and get away with it. So you be ready for it. You hear? Be ready, because I'm coming to get you.
He had a way of getting into the minds of his opponents.
Round 5. This will be no contest. This will be a total annihilation.
Any special training?
No special training. Just be at the fight. I'm ready to back up everything I'm saying.
Did a great job of exemplifying what it means for a good character, a good human being, and the reality of hard work does pay off. Not only that, he brought America together at a time when civil rights was so important. He was able to communicate to the whole world and bring unity among all generations, all races. And so he stood for that, and shows that his practice, and he's always has been a humanitarian, and he continues to show that up until the day of his death.
I'm just glad that he's not suffering anymore, and he's finally at peace. For 30 years, he fought hard in the ring, and then for 30 more, he fought a disease. So, now he's at peace, happy and doing magic tricks again.
Well, I feel like he's deeply in my memory for life. He's been a great friend, a great neighbor. He's always been wonderful to us. You can't forget those kind of memories. It's just wonderful that you were able to know him that well.
He is known as the greatest boxer of all time. A controversial and magical figure known and loved throughout the world.
As soon as he stepped inside a boxing ring, it seemed to be home to him, and that's where he really flourished.
Muhammad Ali brought unprecedented speed and grace to the sport of boxing. His trash talking forever changed what the public expected a champion to be.
I'm too fast. Round 5. This will be no contest.
His accomplishments in the ring are the stuff of legends, as he was involved in some of the greatest fights the world has ever seen.
Frazier's corner man pulls him out, and Ali wins once again one of the greatest bouts that there can have been inside the boxing ring.
His success as a boxer is widely respected, and his techniques are copied by many. But Ali's greatest triumph lies in his legacy as a champion, leader, humanitarian, and artist. His work both inside and outside the ring truly made Muhammad Ali a legend.
Ali, at his peak, was the greatest sportsman, greatest fighter in history.
This is the incredible story of the greatest sporting icon of all time. On June 3rd, boxing legend Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest sporting figures of all time, died at the age of 74. According to his family, he died of septic shock due to unspecified natural causes. The former world heavyweight champion died just over a month after being admitted into hospital. He had been suffering from a respiratory illness, a condition that was complicated by a 32-year battle with Parkinson's disease.
As an overall figure in the world of sport or entertainment or whatever it might be, just by being a man in the 20th and 21st century, he impressed, delighted millions of people throughout the world. He was the most famous man in the world, and I think maybe the most liked man in the world too. And if you didn't like him, when you met him, he would seduce you. He was a man of great charm. And I shall miss him terribly. I was very lucky that I was around when he was around, because he gave me a thrust to my career which nobody else could have given me. So from that point, I'm eternally grateful and just sorrowful that he's gone.
Muhammad Ali's life and career have been played out as much on the front pages of newspapers as on the inside sports pages. His tale of controversy and success is most definitely a unique one. So where did it all begin for the sporting legend?
Cassius Marcellus Clay, big idol of mine and obviously many others. He was raised in Louisville, Kentucky.
What people I don't think fully understand is it was a segregated city. It wasn't a city with a bit of racial tension. It was a black city and a white city, and they didn't mix. There were 3 areas where black people lived. And of those 3 areas, there's a mixed 3 areas, and Ali lived in the sort of middle to the better half of it. He belonged to a Baptist church, and more than he belonged to a Baptist church, he was dragged along to that church. He used to sing in the choir in that church, and he was part of that church.
But it was clear that from a very young age, he almost had boxing in his mind, because he used to get his brother Rudy to try and throw rocks at him in the backyard and try to hit him, and his brother thought he was crazy, but he said he never managed to strike Ali once with a rock because he was so light at his feet. So clearly, even as a developing youngster, he had boxing on his mind.
With boxing clearly in his blood, Ali's interest grew even more when he was just 12 years of age, as through a stroke of good luck, he met boxing coach Joe Martin.
Well, it wasn't until the age of 12 that Ali really got the boxing bug. He was apparently really angry because somebody had stolen his bike and he wanted to beat up the guy who had done it. A local policeman called Joe Martin got hold of him and said, look, if you're going to fight somebody, you've got to learn to box. So Martin took him to a local gym, and very quickly Ali showed he was very adept as a boxer.
With a clear desire to succeed in the ring, Ali then went on to begin his amateur career.
All he was talking about from the age of 13, 14, 15 was that he would win the national Golden Gloves, he would win the Olympic title, and he would win the world heavyweight title. And people forget that Ali didn't reinvent himself later in life and suddenly become this guy that made these bold claims and wrote things in gloves and wrote poetry. He was rattling on like this when he was 14 and 15. The difference is nobody was listening at 14 and 15. 10 years later, the entire world's media was listening, but there was no difference.
Well, he won 6 Kentucky Gold Gloves, which really gives you an indication of how good he was as an amateur boxer, because American amateur boxing at that time was a very, very hard school. But Ali quickly adapted to the sport and made a real impression, and he got $4 a fight, which was nothing compared to what he got when he was a professional in his later career.
Having experienced huge success in his early amateur career, Ali earned the right to represent his country at the 1960 Olympic Games in Rome. And this was when the world started to take note of Muhammad Ali.
And of course, he ended up walking away with a gold medal. He beat a very good Polish fighter in the final. The European media, who hadn't really heard of this guy, Cassius Clay, suddenly became aware of this very, very stylish boxer. And 6 years after somebody stole his bike in Kentucky, he was the Olympic champion.
Tell me how you came to get such a Roman name as that.
Well, as I understand, I'm Cassius Marcellus Clay VI, and my great-great-grandfather was a Kentucky slave, and he was named after some great Kentuckian. Well, Cassius Marcellus Clay is a great name in Kentucky. And really, where he was from or where it was all originated, I couldn't tell you. But since I've reached a little fame in boxing, most people want to know where am I from and where did I get that name. But really, I haven't really checked on it. So I see that I'm going to have to go look in the
You'll have
books,
to look it up.
see what it's all about now that I'm getting a little interview.
After his Olympic success, Ali returned back to the USA as a national hero, but the general public showed little admiration for his achievements.
He's represented the whole country and brought home a gold medal. He found it very difficult to understand and to relate to the political and the social environment that was going on in America. Vast sections of society just saw him as a black guy and wanted nothing to do with him.
And of course, at that time in America, segregation was a real issue. And Ali and a friend went into what was then a whites-only restaurant in Kentucky, his home city, and he was refused service, and that made Ali really angry. And it was claimed at the time he actually took his gold medal and threw it into the Ohio River because he believed it was worth nothing, because even though he had been praised greatly for it by the American sporting public, once he came home, of course, it was worthless.
After his achievements at the 1960 Olympics, Ali went on to sign his first professional contract with the Louisville Sporting Group.
That gave him the stability, and what that really did is that allowed him to pay off the heavy mortgage on the family home that his father had.
He was keen to share the money around, but with that money and with his status as a professional, many people believe that Ali had really arrived as a boxer.
After signing his first professional contract, Ali managed to persuade legendary trainer Angelo Dundee to become his coach, and it was a partnership that was about to change the boxing world.
Angelo Dundee did agree to speak to him when he signed as a professional, but he thought he was mad. He'd seen all of the work that Ali did outside of the ring, and he wasn't too sure he wanted to become involved. But once he met Ali, he really saw the fire and the desire in his eyes to become the greatest, which of course he eventually did.
Muhammad Ali is world famous for his trash-talking toward opponents, but where did this controversial persona originate from?
Cassius Marcellus Clay, the champ, age 24, in his own view the greatest and the prettiest, but as others see him, the loudest and the brashest.
Round 5. This will be no contest. This will be a total annihilation.
Ali had always been a good talker, but in 1961 he had a fight with a guy called Duke Saberdog in Las Vegas, and a few days before the fight he manages to get himself on the radio. And he's sitting down in this radio studio, and in comes this guy with blonde hair making loads of noise and sits down. The radio interviewer says, you know, this Saturday at the Dunes or wherever, you know, this young Cassius Clay, Olympic gold medalist from last year, is going to be fighting Duke Saberdong. What have you got to say about it? And Ali then says, you know, it's going to be a good fight, you know, I'm going to give it my all, I'm going to do what I've got to do, and I hope I win, and I hope the fans come out, I hope they like it, you know, because, you know, I think I'm going to be a great champion. Suddenly, the radio announcer says, and George, and you're fighting at the convention centre the next night. What's going to happen to you? Well, I'm going to tear his head off. I'm going to rip his head off. I'm going to send it back to his mother in a box. Then I'm going to stamp on him. Then I'm going to take his clothes. And then and Ali is looking, or Clay is looking at this guy thinking, whoa. So he leaves there and he has like an epiphany. He thinks, listen, I'm a bad talker. And then from then on, that's when he switches.
No special training, just be at the fight. I'm ready to back up everything I'm saying.
At the time, boxing was relatively straight outside the ring. Boxers would basically have their way in, look at each other, walk away. There were no quotes, there were no sound bites, there was certainly no circus before fights.
So you be ready for it, you hear? Be ready, because I'm coming to get you.
Then Ali arrived. He was talking about floating like a butterfly, stinging like a bee. He was going out to really insult his opponent.
And after I'm through beating him, I think he'll have to join the Beatles and be a singer.
Nobody had done this before. Ali was the first, and of course, as we see now, virtually every single other boxer in the professional ranks indulges in the trash talking, indulges in the showmanship, and that's because of Muhammad Ali and what he saw in Gorgeous George.
He's dying to get in the ring with me again. Well, he'll get his chance.
In 1963, Ali traveled to London, England to fight in his first professional bout abroad, and he took on the UK's hard-hitting Henry Cooper.
Oh, Henry Cooper's nothing but a tramp. He's a bum. I'm the world's greatest. He must fall in 5 rounds, but if you talk about me, I'll cut it 3.
Your prediction about Doug Jones didn't go quite right, though.
Well, Doug Jones was a little tougher than I thought he was, but I'll never fight another fella as tough as Doug Jones, not even that big ugly bear Sonny Liston.
Is he your next fight?
Well, after I annihilate this Henry Cooper, I want that bear.
And what's going to happen to him?
Bad.
Well, it was a big deal for Ali to fight outside of America, and he came to one of the most iconic venues in London, Wembley Stadium, and there were 55,000 people there to see Ali fight Henry Cooper.
Well, I'll tell Henry Cooper, if he's watching this show, to come to the fight and be ready to fight, because I'm coming to get you. I'm coming to London to get you. And after I'm through beating him, I think he'll have to join the Beatles and be a singer.
Cooper was what a heavyweight really was accepted to be at that time. He was a big puncher, he was a strong man, he was aggressive, a gentle giant, but in the ring a brutal man too.
I read some in the paper where he's dying to get in the ring with me again. Well, he'll get his chance. Can you imagine him dying to get in the ring with me?
You used to predict the round before, when in your showman-type days. Do you still do that?
He'll be dying to get out of the ring with me, too.
When Ali was a slight betting underdog, Cooper was seasoned. You know, he'd been there, he'd done that.
Right at the end of the 4th round, he caught Ali with his famous Henry's hammer, the left hook, and Ali went down.
And as he's on the floor, gone, but he's got a great sense of recovery. He wakes up as he hits the floor, hits the ropes, he gets up, bell goes, comes back to the corner.
That was the end of the 4th round, and he hit him about 2 seconds before the end of the round with the left hook.
Now, Angelo Dundee had noticed a tiny little tear in one of the gloves. Okay, so what he did is he manipulated the tear a little bit more, called over the referee, and gained a bit of extra time.
And significantly, the end of that round was far longer than it should have been, so Ali was able to recover and Cooper wasn't able to capitalise, and in the end Cooper received a cut in the following round and the fight was stopped.
Dramatic ending.
Henry's problem wasn't his heart or his power. Henry's problem, his eyebrows and his cheeks. He was lacerated, cut to bits.
But Ali, from that moment, had a great deal of respect for Henry Cooper, which endured right to the end of Cooper's life. And he said, when that left hook hit him, it hit him so hard, even his ancestors in Africa felt the punch.
It used to be easy. Talking and saying I am the greatest, campaigning for the title. Now I am here and everybody else is trying to take my title, such as this fellow named Henry Cooper in London, and all of these fellows are trying to get my title now. And it's no longer fun getting up every morning early to run and training every day. It's getting to be a grind and a job, but it pays off if you're in condition and if you can keep winning.
After beating Cooper, Ali's professional record stood at 19 wins from 19 fights, which earned him the chance to fight the much-feared heavyweight champion, Sonny Liston.
Before the Ali and Liston fight, Ali had been stalking him. His backers in Louisville had paid for him to get on a plane and go to Las Vegas to harass Liston when he was training, to harass Liston before and after his fight with Floyd Patterson in Las Vegas. In fact, Ali invades the ring.
He had a way of getting into the minds of his opponents, and we all do. You know, my style was different. In terms of his, you know, when you can bamboozle a person with talk, you can generally have that one-upmanship in mind, where, you know, they then get confused because they take their minds off of the objective, which is to score points. When a fighter gets angry, as Muhammad Ali was able to make so many of his opponents angry, then you're not focused on what you're supposed to be doing. And he always was, which was to score points and win, and that he did.
Ali was a huge underdog going into the fight, and what followed was quite simply the biggest upset in boxing history.
Cassius Clay on the move as we see, looking to get Sonny to run.
It was obvious in the first bell that Liston, the world champion, had miscalculated. He hadn't factored in how fast and how elusive and how good, and I also think how powerfully built and how strong Ali was.
At the end of the fourth round, he went back to his corner and he complained that his eyes were burning, and Ali said he couldn't carry on. And the reason for that was Liston had applied some ointment to his gloves, and it had got into Ali's face and had really created problems for his eyesight, which was, of course, beyond the rules, but apparently it's something that Liston used to do.
Something's wrong with Clay.
I see that, Joe. His eyes are bothering him. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't know exactly what happened. They're yelling from Cassius Clay's corner. Something got in his right eye.
And he went back out there, and the sweat and the tears which were flowing at the time washed the ointment away, and Ali managed to work his way back into the fight. And then when it came to the end of the sixth round, Liston sat on his stool and never got up again.
They might be stopping it. That might be all, ladies and gentlemen.
At the end, as he said, I shocked the world. Then he started pointing at different journalists at ringside. He said, I told you I was taking names, and I'm taking names, and he wasn't joking.
In the early 1960s, Ali became very close with American Muslim leader and human rights activist Malcolm X, and it was a friendship that was making headlines all across America.
Their relationship was a little bit like father and son, in the sense that Malcolm X embraced Clay and Ali and tutored him and talked to him. He was a very charismatic man, and most of what he said seemed to appeal to Clay.
And a great deal of what Malcolm X was saying really resonated with Ali, and he very quickly became a spiritual mentor for him, because Ali saw Malcolm X as somebody who was standing up for black power and black human rights at a time in America when there was segregation and a good deal of racism towards what Ali saw as his people. So the more he listened to Malcolm X, the more he spoke to him, the more that Malcolm X became an influence on him.
In 1964, Ali announced his official membership with the Nation of Islam, and it was an announcement that was surrounded by controversy.
Will your next fight be billed as Cassius Clay or as Muhammad Ali?
Muhammad Ali.
The conversion had been slow, and word had seeped out, and the press were against it. Even the black writers were against it. The people around him were against it. Dundee was against it, not on any religious grounds, just because he knew it would cause problems. He wanted his guy to be popular. It was a tricky time that for the Nation of Islam. X was kicked out, and then X was killed. There were all sorts of complaints against Elijah Muhammad and the way he ran the Nation of Islam. The FBI was seriously involved. Muhammad Ali has got an enormous FBI file. He was being monitored left, right and centre. And that was what I think upset Dundee most, in my opinion, was the fact he didn't want his guy to be painted as a bad guy. It was his choice. How he practiced was his choice.
He felt that by taking a name from the Nation of Islam, he was really doing something important, not for his sporting career, but for his life as a whole, and he always stuck to it.
In 1965, a year after their first fight, a rematch was agreed between Ali and Liston. The fight proved to be hugely controversial, as Sonny Liston fell in the first round to a blow that was labeled as the Phantom Punch. Many fans and journalists started to speculate that Liston had taken a dive.
And even Ali was surprised that Liston had hit the deck. But of course, after 20 seconds, Liston was counted out, and Walcott eventually said, hang on, you're out. And that was the end of the fight. And the public were let down, and I think Ali felt let down deep inside, because he wanted to take on Liston at his best. And there were all sorts of rumours circulating that Liston had huge debts and he bet against himself, and that's why he took a dive. And if you look at slow motion replays of the fight, there is a chopping right hand from Ali which does catch Liston, but whether it was strong enough to actually knock him out, we'll never know.
In 1967, Ali was drafted into the U.S. Army, but due to his religious views, he refused the draft. It was a decision that was going to have major repercussions on his personal life and boxing career. And shortly after he rejected the call of the Army, his boxing license was revoked and his title was stripped away.
Former world heavyweight champion Cassius Clay refused to take the oath of induction into the Army. The black Muslim fighter, who's also known as Muhammad Ali, was immediately stripped of his title by the World Boxing Association. Clay insisted that he is an ordained minister and should be exempt. Clay also charges race discrimination by the Houston Draft Board. He faces federal prosecution and a possible 5-year prison sentence plus $10,000 fine. Later, Martin Luther King praised Clay's courage.
He refuses to cross the line in Houston. Within hours, New York had dropped him, taken away his license to fight, even though he was world champion at the time, and the rest of America followed. Before he'd even been charged, before there'd even been a court date for his trial, which of course he went to and got sentenced to 5 years, which took a few years to be suspended completely.
Something terrible happened there, because possibly, if not definitely, the greatest heavyweight that we ever had his greatest years taken away from him.
The years we lost were the best Muhammad Ali years. Ali agrees with that, and Angelo Dundee told me that personally. The people that were with him in the 60s will tell you, that gap, we lost the greatest sportsman and obviously the greatest boxer of all time.
In January of 1970, certain states and boxing commissions began to consider allowing Ali to fight again, and just a few months later, his boxing license was reinstated. After a 3.5-year exile, Muhammad Ali was back in the ring.
In 1970, he fought Jerry Quarry, who had become the man in Ali's absence.
It wasn't a walkover. You know, he could have fought a bum. He could have fought a guy that was hopeless. So many champions now, when they come back, they would have fought rubbish, garbage. He went to a top 5 heavyweight and had a proper good war first time back. You know why? Because he wanted to test himself. Because he knew if he was going to go on and keep using the same rhetoric and keep pointing and keep claiming, he needed to know himself that he still had it in his feet and in his head, and he did.
In 1971, Ali took on Joe Frazier, who was so famously given Ali's title when it was stripped away from him in 1967. It was one of the most anticipated bouts of all time and was labeled the fight of the century.
And this might shock and amaze you, but I will destroy Joe Frazier. Some people say, you better watch Joe Frazier, he's awful strong. I said, tell him to try band roll-on. That's deodorant.
Muhammad Ali down in Miami earlier this week, and he called you a good street fighter. Does that make you mad?
Don't make me mad at all.
How do you react?
I feel like I'm just as much fighter, better, and twice times as better as him.
He also claims he's got a spy in your camp, somebody that phones him up every day and gives him a report on your progress. Does that bother you?
They're not going to be in that ring March 8th.
Doesn't bother you at all?
Don't bother me at all.
How do you rate him as an opponent?
I think he's a good fighter.
You making any forecasts about the fight?
What you mean forecasts?
You're going to win?
Sure.
In how many?
1 to 10. That's one question the same. Go ahead.
You're going to win. By a knockout,
right.
You say?
By a knockout.
The fight of the century was correctly named. It was a fight that ebbed and flowed, and it was obvious to anybody watching that the Ali in the ring was still terrific. He was still great, but he just lost that little edge of speed. That had been lost in that 3.5-year gap, and Frazier had that little bit extra, but it was still a tight fight. In the 15th and final round, Frazier lands arguably the most famous left hook in history to drop Ali.
But he was back on his feet very quickly. Frazier couldn't believe it, but when it came to the decision, Frazier won. Ali lost. For the first time, he'd really lost a marquee fight in America, and it took a long time for the animosity between Ali and Frazier to dissipate. In many ways, it never did, but now Ali had a real challenge because he was no longer the greatest, and he had to get back on the pedestal once again.
After the first professional defeat of his career, Ali dusted himself off and powered through his next opponents, riding a winning wave that proved he would always get back up after being knocked down.
Something happened with those guys in the 60s and 70s, and I mean the 60s and 70s because they had that profile and they had those fights, and Ali just wasn't afraid to take good fight, hard fight, good fight, very hard fight, good fight. He could have just trod water. He could have had 10 fights against 10 nobodies and still got world title fights. He didn't. He went the hard way. He went to the tank or the bank every single time in those fights.
In 1974, world-famous boxing promoter Don King organized a fight between Ali and the world heavyweight champion George Foreman. The fight took place in Zaire and was known as the Rumble in the Jungle.
So the stage is set. We're just about ready to begin. Round one, the heavyweight championship of the world at stake.
And many people believed Ali had no chance because the people who had beaten Ali had been destroyed by Foreman in previous title fights.
This time, the championship is at stake and $5 million will be paid to both fighters. Ali ready, Foreman ready, we're waiting for the opening bell.
And if people thought that Ali had no chance against Liston, against Foreman, they feared for his health.
A real strong right hand just underneath the heart, and Muhammad Ali is taking some punishment now.
And Ali, very quickly, got everybody behind him.
Very close. You wouldn't call that.
Foreman went into that ring, not just facing Muhammad Ali, but basically facing the whole of Zaire as well. And it was an incredible fight. It was extremely brutal.
Left jab right in the button, thrown by Ali. Another left jab. Ali showing his flinching speed as Foreman continues to wail at the body of Muhammad Ali.
Ali's got a fantastic plan worked out with Angelo Dundee. Ding ding, throws the plan out the window, sits on the ropes, lets George Foreman, the most feared heavyweight ever, possibly even more ferocious and more dangerous than Sonny Liston, he sits on the ropes and lets him hit him. Ali has worked out that he probably hasn't got 8 rounds of speed, 8 rounds of movement, and 8 rounds of power in him to put off Big George. He needs Big George to play his part in his own downfall by ruining himself, by just hitting at elbows and hitting at air. That's what he does.
Foreman not scoring these punches at all. Light pouring punches, unusual for George Foreman.
So when Ali delivers the finish, just before storms hit and the greatest fight in history, the Rumble in the Jungle, as Ali delivers the finish, Foreman would have gone down if a mosquito had bumped into his head. It was the sweetest moment.
And he works over the shoulder of Foreman. Foreman gets up to the knee. 8. That's it. The fight is stopped. Muhammad Ali, a dramatic 8-round knockout.
And Ali had won, and it was astonishing. At the age of 32, he was world champion once again. He had beaten the man who was destroying every other contender in world boxing.
Is it the greatest moment in sport? It probably is if you take into account the build-up. I truly believe it is.
This is the most joyous scene ever seen in the history of boxing. Watch it. And that was no phantom. That was no phantom punch. That was no phantom punch. And he's down and out.
And it just added to the Ali legend. And in many ways, that was his defining moment.
After so famously winning back his title, a rematch was arranged between Ali and Joe Frazier, and it was to be the 3rd fight between the two legends. The fight is regarded as possibly the greatest battle between two heavyweights and will always be known as the Thrilla in Manila.
Well, I must say that Joe is not cleaning up on Ali here. The sudden late round Ali flurry.
They just hit each other and abuse each other. The savagery is almost unprecedented, and that's saying something for an Ali or a Frazier. fights.
Right, quick lead by Ali. Ali punching better in this round. There's another right, a left and a right. Suddenly, Ali seems to have recaptured some punching ability.
When it came to the final round, Eddie Futch, the legendary trainer for Frazier, threw in the towel, and Frazier complained and said, "I want to fight," but Futch said, "You can't see," because both of Frazier's eyes were huge and blown up, and he was basically blinded by Ali.
It's all over, and Muhammad Ali at the end of the 14th round is a TKO. He did it in the end, the hardest fight of his life.
After winning possibly the greatest battle ever to be witnessed inside a boxing ring, Ali went on to lose his title to Leon Spinks. However, just 7 months later, Ali won his title back in a rematch with Spinks, making him boxing's first 3-time heavyweight champion.
So Ali manages to win the title back. They're both really good fights in a bizarre kind of way. But when you look at them in a cold light of day, and I hate to sound like an old man, but the Ali from the late 60s would have barely broke a sweat against Neon Leon in any of those rounds in those two completed fights. Even the Ali from the early 70s, I think, would have had maybe a bit too much power. But certainly the 60s Ali, the greatest Ali, he would have made mincemeat of young Neon.
But it's significant that between the two fights, Ferdy Paquetto, Ali's doctor, resigned because he'd looked at examinations of Ali's body after the first fight, and he said that he simply wasn't fit enough to carry on, and he said Ali should retire. Typically of Ali, he wanted his world title back, so he fought on, but by now we were starting to see Ali's body was breaking down. He wasn't the infallible figure he was in his youth, but he was determined to fight on. That unquenchable spirit was literally carrying him into the ring and carrying him to the world title.
After making history by becoming boxing's first 3-time champion, Ali lost his title to Larry Holmes in 1980. He went on to fight top heavyweight contender Trevor Berbick. Ali lost the fight in round 10, and just a day later, he announced his retirement from boxing.
Well, the end finally came in the Bahamas against Trevor Berbick. Of course, the end had really come in Las Vegas when he lost to Larry Holmes in a fight that was horrible to watch. Horrible for Larry Holmes. He ended up in Ali's suite at Caesars crying at the feet of his hero. The Berbick fight, well, the less said about that the better. It was a fight that shouldn't have happened, and the people around him should have known better. They knew that shouldn't have happened. Everybody knew that shouldn't have happened, and it's one of the most unedifying spectacles in sport. That left him no option but to retire.
He didn't retire at the top, which of course is a great shame, but when he did go out, of course, he still went out as the man who had retained his world title on so many occasions. He was a legend.
After having retired from boxing, Ali's health had started to noticeably decline. His speech had become extremely slurred, and his movements had become slower. And in 1984 came the sad announcement that Muhammad Ali had Parkinson's disease.
Champ, could we ask you how you doing?
West.
Are you going to have the operation, or do you know yet?
Don't know yet. West.
Have they diagnosed it as Parkinson's? Syndrome? Are you willing to take the chance down there?
Just not really a chance. He's operating 58 people.
So it's something of a gamble for you?
No, he's done 58 operations, all successful.
So it would take a long time to complete it then, huh?
5 hours.
Ali, do you think it's been Parkinson's all along, rather than any kind of brain injury?
Joe Kemp, please call 2480.
You think it's been all along when you've had speech problems? Do you think it was Parkinson's starting out, the onset of Parkinson's?
I know so.
All right. Thank you very much.
The debate is, did the boxing cause the Parkinson's? Did the boxing make the Parkinson's worse? My understanding is that the medical experts say yes, it did. Was there anything that could have been done? Well, I suppose he should have retired after the Rumble in the Jungle. He'd already made 30 odd million quid. The last thing that fighters want to be told is that they have to retire. And how can anyone say to him, your health's not what it used to be? He's just beaten you know, one of the best heavyweights ever. How can you then go to that guy, what, in his suite, you know, next to the Congo and say, okay, listen, Mum, it was great last night, but listen, we've had a look at your health, you're a bit slurry, you should retire. It's like a joke. He was never going to retire. He was always going to fight too long. But the key is, and I really believe this, and too many people are quick to blame the people around him. Those people loved him. Angelo Dundee loved him. They were there with him because they knew that they loved him and that at least they could take care of him to a degree rather than walking away and having mercenaries come in.
Many people believe that Ali was infallible, but of course he wasn't. The legend may have been, and when he got Parkinson's disease, it was a real sad moment, not just for boxing, but for many people around the world of any walk of life.
In the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta, Georgia, there was much speculation as to who would be given the honor of lighting the Olympic flame. The honor is given to a sporting great of the hosting country, and at the Georgia Olympics, the honor was given to the greatest sporting icon of all time, Muhammad Ali.
And I was in the stadium that night, and it makes you well up now even thinking about it. Something happened that night. I've been at some great sports events, Olympics and World Cups, and great fights over the last 30 odd years, but as he got there and as he lit that thing, as he took it and as he lit it, that's about the top.
Even though he was now struggling hugely with Parkinson's disease, his bravery and his courage were evident at the heart of that opening ceremony when he lit the Olympic flame, and the whole stadium was almost in awe because it was Muhammad Ali and he was back on an international stage, and it was amazing to see him once again.
It was quite mesmerising. When people left there that night, people were leaving slightly mesmerised that night by what they'd seen. Energised, but they weren't all, it wasn't gung-ho, it was really strange. I think people realised they'd witnessed something.
In 2005, Ali was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom at a ceremony with George W. Bush. It's the highest medal a U.S. civilian can receive, and it was the recognition of all the amazing humanitarian work Ali had done throughout his life.
And I think it was right he was given this, because throughout his life, Ali was somebody who had huge ironclad beliefs about peace and about helping other people. You go back to when he first got his professional contract, the first thing he did was buy his mother a pink Cadillac, and that just gives you an indication of his generosity of spirit. And it's right that the American people always saw him as somebody who was an icon, and that's why George Bush was giving him this award.
There is no doubt that Muhammad Ali is the greatest sporting icon of all time. There were mythical sports figures before him, but when Cassius Clay burst onto the sports scene from his native Louisville in the 1950s, he broke the mold. He changed the world of sports and went on to change the world itself. As Muhammad Ali, he would become the most recognizable face on the planet. Ali was a transcendent athlete and entertainer, a heavyweight Fred Astaire, a rapper before rap was born. He was a mirror of his era, a dynamic figure in the racial and cultural battles of his time. He was involved in some of the greatest battles ever to be seen inside a boxing ring, battles that inspired and mesmerized people all around the globe. As the world mourns and pays tribute to a sporting legend, there is no doubt his legacy will live on forever.